Hello world, welcome to the first video of many on the concept of reverse engineering. This is primarily directed at beginners, but anyone can join and learn. I'll primarily be focusing on reversing malware, but I'll also get into reversing applications and maybe a little bit of games. Before you start reversing, it is a good idea to get some general concepts of cybersecurity as well as programming and computer science, but it is not necessarily required, and I will be covering all the basics. I will also link some resources to learning those concepts in the description. In this video, we'll be covering the introduction to reverse engineering. What is it? Why do we do it? What can we do with it? And how do we do it are the primary subjects. All of these will have timestamps at the time of editing, which I will hopefully get around to. So with that out of the way, let's get into it. An important thing before we get started is to note that this is strictly educational. So please don't go out of your way to reverse engineer, Google, Bank of America, something illegal like that. Those people tend not to like that kind of stuff. So, biggest question is, what is reverse engineering? Think of it as taking something apart and figuring out how it works and what went into making it and all that kind of stuff. The easiest analogy is thinking of like a cake. A very good cake. You don't know what's in the cake, but you want to make it yourself. So, how do you go about that? You might start with flour, because every single cake needs flour. So you have to figure out what kind of flour it uses based off of the taste, or something like that. After you repeat that process with eggs, sugar, milk, then you're able to make your own cake. You know what goes into it, you know how it's all put together, you can make it yourself now. So think about that, but with like computer programs. Instead of trying to figure out what ingredients they use, you might try to figure out what code it uses and the concepts behind that code, the reason for doing it, how it all communicates, that sort of stuff. The main thing with reverse engineering is that it's taking a computer program apart just to learn about it, recreate it, manipulate it, all that kind of cool stuff. This then leads us into our next reason. Why do we do it? Why do we reverse engineer programs? There are many reasons to reverse engineer things. There could be malware that you're trying to figure out how to destroy, get rid of, prevent, all that kind of stuff. You might find a cheat in a video game and you want to exploit it more, how to optimize all that kind of stuff. You might be attempting to pirate software like Adobe or Windows. Please don't come after me, Microsoft. There could be security flaws in a program that you're trying to find, all that kind of stuff. I don't condone any of the illegal reasoning for reverse engineering, but I enjoy reverse engineering because it's fun and I like to learn how all the malware gets made and how it can ultimately be destroyed. Many apps like Kik reference in the terms of service to not reverse engineer the program, decompile it, any of that kind of stuff. It can be illegal if you reverse engineer and then take copyrighted material, which is a very interesting legal situation. So unless you want the cops involved, just don't do anything illegal. Now comes the fun part. What can we do with it? What can we do with reverse engineering? Well, since it is seeing the code that makes the application, you can learn a lot more about some program. You can see what it does, see all the security flaws within it, learn how to break it, all that kind of cool stuff. Sometimes I'll have a friend compile a program for me and then see if I can break into it. Usually it'll have a password protected thing, sometimes it'll have encryption, all that kind of stuff. I like to learn, I like to test myself, and I like trying to hack things. Let's have a hypothetical situation. Let's say that you had a license checker that accepted licenses on a mathematical basis. You can reverse engineer that program to see what the input gets compared to and try that. If it's an equation, and you can figure out a number that meets that mathematical equation's requirement. And using that, you can bypass that screen and get through without even a valid license. Another more practical example would be ransomware. For example, you want to dig into it because it locks all your files, so you want to figure out what it does. So you can dig into it, disassemble it, find out what hashing algorithm or encryption algorithm is used, and then off of that, you have a better idea, I'd say, to reverse it and get all your files back. Now we get into the fun parts. How do you reverse engineer? It's kind of tricky. It depends on a multitude of things, from the operating system to what processor is used. All that kind of stuff plays a small part about changing around assembly code, opcode, all that kind of fun stuff. Even though it's tricky, there are a number of ways to reverse engineer. There's so many different tools, and I'll try to go over as many of them as I can, but I can't promise that I'll cover all of them. There are two big steps to reverse engineering. There's the initial disassembling and then the recompiling. So I'll walk into different parts of that. You have to disassemble it to break it down into machine code. That gives us the different assembly and all that kind of stuff. And then recompiling it makes it more readable for us as humans. So it'll usually turn into either C code or Java, depending on if we're doing Android or not. But there are many different tools that can be used. There's like Ghidra, there's IDA, there's JADX or JADX, I don't know how to pronounce it. There's GDB, all that kind of stuff. Those are the main ones that I'll be working with and covering, but if there are any others that pop up on my radar, I'll make a video about that too. Like I said previously, some of the common tools used in reverse engineering are GDB, Ghidra, IDA, and JADX, whatever, as well as the command strings. You can usually use that in Windows or in Linux. Most operating systems have a plugin for it. So, in this series, I'll be covering a number of things. I'll be covering computer architecture, basic tools in reverse engineering, basic programming, how to read assembly code, reversing encryption, and it'll all be learned by doing. I'll be using some examples of things that I program or that I find some malware samples and use those. So please stay tuned for future videos and all that. In case you want to learn more between now and then, I have a list of people who have amazing videos down below. So that's it for this video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Hope to start covering some reverse engineering, probably start with some computer architecture. So see you in a week, probably.